Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of No Foolish Squash Questions. My name is Paul Frank. I'm the squash director at Squash Tigers, as is somewhere on my shirt here. Joined by my friend and fellow coach from up at the Hackley School, Colin White. How are you, buddy?
I'm pretty good. If anybody can tell from looking at the reflection of my glasses, they'll see some snow in the ground. But apart from that, I'm great.
Yeah. And this was, for those of you who are watching a little bit later, this was recorded on Groundhog Day, which for some slightly esoteric reasons is one of my favorite American days of the year. So the groundhog came up this morning and said another 6 weeks of winter. So I'm not quite sure what to take out of that, but there's at least a 50% chance that the oversized rodent was correct. So there you go.
Well, look at it from this point of view that I had my 6-year-old having to explain to me what Groundhog Day was. So interesting days ahead for me.
I love a good groundhog. Anyway, today, I should say before we go any further, if you have something we haven't touched on, or if you have any, corrections, thoughts, problems, happiness, no foolish squash questions at gmail.com is your receptacle. I mean, you can go to Colin at his Hackley address, or certainly me at Squash Tigers, but for things particularly relating to our YouTube channel, no foolish squash questions at gmail.com. Thank you to not very many, but a couple of guys who have already sent some very encouraging spots on it. So, always nice to hear people, even if all they're doing is poking fun at us. So thank you for that anyway. Today's topic very much on. Sorry.
We are used to that, people poking fun at us, especially with our accents. But anyway, carry on.
Welcome, Bill. Welcome to my life. Where were we? The topic of today very much around what are your favorite shots. So that was actually one that we stole off one of our email contributions. I expanded a bit to say, okay, what are your favorite shots, either to play or to coach? And then in your perspective, Colin, to coach to what sorts of demographic? That's always a fun one for me, just because I think sometimes people do tend to get less imaginative than maybe they could, just because the whole world does tend to get a little bit fond of their straight drive and their straight drop shot. So always nice to think, what are your favorite things to coach? What jumps into your mind, buddy?
Well, I'm sure a psychologist would be able to tell by whichever shot you pick a certain amount about your personality. I've almost got the feeling from my career, the only shot I ever learned to play was a straight drive. So there's a little about my personality. I guess what I would come at it is I tend to like to teach that shot before the attacking shot. How do they set themselves up for that chance to apply pressure and a chance to attack using their own personal choices and their own personality? I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No, it does. I mean, for me anyway, a perfect way of dealing with that is if I have a player who's a particularly strong physical specimen. So I've got a runner, I've got a young lady or a young gentleman who particularly has a physical advantage. I always really emphasize a counter drop. The whole mentality that if somebody takes you short in the court, so a counter drop. So in other words, a straight drop shot off any short ball. So the mentality always being that if I'm big and fit and strong and I've done all my work and I think I can physically dominate you, every time I go forward in the court, if I take you short as well, then you do as much work as I do. You've made me run those 3 or 4 steps into the front third of the court. I give a counter drop to your short ball. I've made you run the same distance. It's a very simple version of the professional idea of playing your own corner. Now, if you take me to front backhand, I'm going to take you to front backhand. You take me to front forehand, I'm going to take you up there as well. You don't get to go, and take me to the front of the court with impunity. I mean, I think frequently, again, for big, strong people, they get a nice little boast from their opponent or a drop from their opponent, and they crush it back. And also often that's volleyed by their opponent. No point being fitter than the other protagonist unless you actually use that fitness to your own advantage.
Yeah, very true. And unfortunately, too many of those guys who are fit tend to just use it to retrieve and not sort of turn the tables and apply pressure and make the person work just as hard as them, and they'll be the first to fall.
Oh, look, it's also, I mean, it's not for everybody, but it's one of those things. It's very, very hard to mess up as well. So even if you're very gifted, that's fantastic. But if you're not particularly gifted at taking the ball short, of course, a counter drop is the safest way to do it. You're only that far from the front wall anyway. So same as if you're throwing a piece of paper in the waste basket, very hard to stuff that up. I've always considered you a bit of a lob guy, buddy. Is that still true?
That is true. I mean, I grew up playing on cold courts. Grew up playing guys who. It's funny when I was thinking back on this topic, and I played for a league team, and I grew up playing for that league team, and I played adults most of my life, while still playing junior tournaments. And I've got to say that the team we had, there was not one flair player among us. It was almost like you would almost be kicked off the team if you were a little bit, you opened up the court too early, or you didn't run enough, or you didn't. So it's quite funny that was the environment I grew up in. So that was my game, sort of lifting it deep, hitting it deep. I just wish I had somebody to teach me how to take it short.
Yeah, the things that we hope we provide for our pupils that we maybe weren't that great at ourselves. Every time I hear lob, I always hear volley lob. I mean, my mentor 1,000 years ago when I was playing was a guy called Roger Flynn. He used to have the most delightful volley lob.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you find takes a little bit of strength. You know, so most people associate lobbing probably with people that are not as physically strong. But certainly to hit a volley lob, you need to be able to grab a racket. And that great adage that no matter how big and strong and brave and wonderful your opponent is, they can't run up. So I hit a good volley lob, I hit a good lob, and all of a sudden you and I are about the same as each other. It's a similar mentality to that counter drop. I play a lob, what are you going to do? You'll do nothing fundamentally. If I hit that properly, even if you're the number one in the world, you'll run into the back wall and you're going to get the darn thing. So certainly worth the repetitions of it. It's one of those barriers to entry. It takes a little bit of work to get particularly a young person good at it, but once they are, I've always thought that it had a really big return on the investment.
And I've got to say, in the world that I live in, and sort of travel around and see players, it's really an underused shot. I get the feeling it's not being taught enough. I do remember being on a coaching conference with the great Jonah Barrington, and what he said was, try to remind people is that they pay for the whole front wall. So you don't need to just hit everything below the wall as hard as you can. You pay for all of it, so why not use all of it?
Honestly, I mean, Jonah Barrington's still one of the just greatest guys just to listen to in the whole world. When I was playing pro and living in Holland, he was the Dutch national coach at that stage.
Yeah.
And didn't have much to do with him, but I was just fortunate to be around him while he was pontificating about X and Y and Z, and a tremendous advocate of height and patience and character and all those sort of great things. I mean, the man was an inspirational guy. I mean, he must have been, well, not 21 at that stage. I mean, he's still ticking along, working out how hard now, which is fantastic. But inspirational fellow. I love that. On favorite.
If you want, I can tell you a quick story that I got to play him. He was playing another conference, and I got to be his guinea pig for the weekend, and I got to play him, and I found myself 2-love up, I think 5-2 up, and I started thinking about victory, and all of a sudden the door got slammed in my face, and suddenly I'm coming off the court losing 3-2, because when he smelled blood, when I took my eye off and started thinking about beating the great Jonah Barrington, and he got his foot in the door. He ripped that door off the hinges and beat me over the head with it.
Oh, look, it's rare that you find someone who played at quite as high a level, who is also quite an inspirational, speaker about the sport as well. As a guy you could just listen to for hours.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more like you should, in the modern era, it's more like a guy that would be involved in the combat sports. It was a guy that recognized it wasn't enough just to hit the ball and run around after it, but you needed to give people a reason to watch it and inspire people to play it and whatnot. I mean, just an awesome guy. An awesome.
Yeah.
Going back to our subject, but where are you? Are you a big boasty coach or not? Talking about favorite things to teach.
I really do like to teach the boast and the volley boast, especially when you've forced that person behind you and using it to stretch them up to the front of the court, and had some players come in and it's like they'd never even really thought of the volley boast before, and suddenly they were smacking that ball in, and yeah, so I really do enjoy to teach it, and and get them using it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the, a little bit like that volley lob. Those sorts of strokes take quite a few repetitions to, not even to master, but just to have a general degree of proficiency. So if you can manage to get either coach and player to just persevere for a little while, because you're going to look a little bit silly just until you get used to angles and the particular techniques involved in different parts of the court.
Yeah, I guess that's why I really do love the pattern of straight, boast, cross, and just getting them to work all the different shot combinations that you can use from that, and not just getting them to think that it's a simple straight ball or a simple boast or a simple cross. There's so many variations that they can explore within that one pattern.
With my own boasty work, I mean, I will always get one, particularly with the pros, you'll always get one, one gentleman or one lady in the squad who goes, I don't like boasting. And then the classic answer for me is always, well, that's fine. You might not like boasting, but you should probably have some in your practice, because you don't get to tell the other person you're playing and they're not allowed to boast it. So even if you've elected to turn that option off for yourself, you happen to play one of the others who like angles, you're going to have to get a few reps at that little change of direction.
I did see Gawad play at the Tournament of Champions a couple of years ago, and his boasts were, I mean, I swear the ball was rolling down the wall and he was still boasting the ball and absolutely pulling the legs out of the other person. He was boasting the other person to death. It was such an art what he was doing. It was incredible.
Yeah, no, a perfect example. And again, very hard thing to do. Someone tremendously gifted and also lovely mover for an unlikely looking athlete. The man can move. I mean, you wouldn't immediately pick him as being that guy off court, and certainly still plays the worst first game in the history of world squash for an elite player. What a guy. No, it's always, and the perennial debate, probably a good one to close on. Is it a tickle boast or a trickle boast, Colin? Boast
not yet.
Is it a tickle or a trickle? I know what it is in Squash Tigers because there's no choice, but what is it up at Hackley?
Well, if I can tell you that we had the conversation, very apt question that is, just last week we had a middle schooler asking, what is a straight drop? And we were like trying to convince her, at least one of our better girls in our middle school program, and we're going, no, if it hits the sidewall, it's not a straight drop. There is a different name for that. So yeah, so the question was tickle or trickle. I'm trying to remember back. I think it's I'm going to go with trickle boast.
Certainly here it's a tickle boast anyway. It's some sort of vaguely anti-English sentiment, I think, from my Australian heritage. But whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Anyway, on that somewhat controversial note, we should say goodbye for today. Catch up with each other another time. Thanks for having a bit of a chat. Apologies to everyone in my slightly environment while I'm getting the club organised. Obviously, you can see everything's together in the background, but haven't quite organised the sound studio as well as I might like at this stage. So sorry about that.
Well, I got to say that court is looking mighty good behind you, and I'm looking forward to getting down and trying it out.
Look, it is, when we were talking about that lob before, the lights, TV quality streaming lights. So you put a good lob up there, buddy, and we'll be searching for it for quite a while. Anyway, good to see you.
That's just what I need. Just what I need to give me some time to crawl back to the tee.
Yeah, I need all the help I can get to. All right, mate. Good to see you. Thanks again.
All the best.
See you, buddy.
Bye.